Welcome, friends, back after the break. And the first half, 25 minutes. And by the way, sorry if you got derailed by news. Sometimes it's at the beginning, 5 minutes before the 25-minute segment for the first half hour. And I don't know how it all shakes out, but you can stand a little bit of bad news before we get to the good news, which is what I have, I believe. Anyway, we were sharing how the 6,000 years is ended. I'm believing that God has three calendars. Okay, it says in 2 Peter 3:8 that beloved, be not ignorant. 1,000 years is like a day. Day is like 1,000 years. God is not slack. The day of the Lord will come. The day of the Lord is the end time period, and it comes after, I think, 6,000 years, because God in the fourth commandment gives us 6 days to do our work. 6 days, 1,000 years like a day, 6,000 years. Sir Isaac Newton, one of the most brilliant people of all times, inventing calculus and divided the sun spectrum through a pyramid to find the rainbow and different things that he was just brilliant, but also translated some books of the Bible. And he did a chronology in which he thought the 6,000 would be ended around the year 2000. And that, I believe, is true. Ussher's chronology, also similar, but not quite exactly the same. And I don't think God intended for us to have to be counting how many years this king and that king and so on. We don't have to do the math complicated. In the first half of this hour, we saw how that the book of Daniel has 77s, which were 10 jubilees, and ended at the time of Christ. But 50 jubilees bring us to our time, 1994 to 5, when the Pope went to the Congress, to the UN rather, and then a 20-year break till Pope Francis also went to the UN. And the point is, why the 20-year break? It happens to fit the 77s. 77s are 490, 490 and 490 is 980. 20 years left over in 1,000 years. So yes, I think 2015 was the end of 6,000, and we looked at other signs, when-then signs, which beg an understanding, because either God is giving false signs. Christ, Yeshua said, woe to them with child, woe to them give suck. Well, we're 6 years past that, and but still nobody's quitting pregnancies. Women are still having. I think we need to warn people, hey, tribulation is impending. Do not have babies. I think it's a serious time. Woe to them that give suck. And those events could not happen immediately, or God would not have been merciful. But He's given us. I'm seeing a 7-year ending. Okay, like Joseph, 7 years of famine. Nebuchadnezzar ate grass for 7. Jacob was betrothed to Rachel for 7. If we're faithful to the bridegroom and our covenant that we're going to make to become his kingdom, we can eat the wedding cake in heaven. But it's a 7-year ending, and 7 years is a week in the Bible, like the 77s of Daniel 9. And a week always begins after a sabbatical year. Okay, just like the Sabbath. Jews understand Saturday is Sabbath, and Sunday is another week. Okay, that week of 7 years ends with the seventh day is Sabbath again. Well, same with the years. Okay, and I'm going to suggest how that fits together, because the Bible has a chiastic structure, fancy word for mirror image. Okay, man crawls into to sin in Genesis. And he crawls out of sin in Revelation. And Christ, Yeshua, created for 6 days, but ceased on the seventh day. It was a Sabbath in Genesis 1 and 2. Okay, but if that's a chiastic structure, we see it again in Revelation. He will mediate for 6 years and cease mediation on a sabbatical year. And for that to happen, the end time has to begin right after a sabbatical year. It's just like a week begins on Sunday. And after a sabbatical year, when's the next sabbatical? Well, I got an email from Israel wanting a donation to plant fruit trees, because it says next year is a sabbatical year. 2022 can't plant. It's a Sabbath year. So yes, I agree. That fits the historic dates of 457, 34 AD, 1798 when the Pope was taken prisoner, That was a different calendar, by the way. That was we said 1,000 years is like a day is one calendar. God also has a day like a year, and that was the 77s of Daniel 9. And the Pope was going to have power for time, times, and half a time, which from Daniel we find that the time is a year, but 360 years in 12 months times 30 days each makes 1,260 for 3.5 years. And that papal supremacy went from 538, when the third horn of Daniel 7 was uprooted by the little horn, the papacy, and it ruled the world, the Holy Roman Empire, until 1798, when the Pope was taken prisoner by Napoleon. So it's interesting that the times fit a day for a year, but in the end time, I think the UN is going to have world supremacy for literal 3.5 years, not day for a year of 1,260, but 1,260 literal days. God is going to give his side power first. In Revelation 11:3, he says, I'll give my 2 witnesses power for 1,260 days. They have the power to shut the heavens, turn water to blood. I'm looking forward to that. But I believe, then it says, when they finish their testimony, the beast ascends to make war. And that beast in Revelation 13, verse 5, has power to continue 42 months. That's the papacy, through the UN. That's the vehicle, or the beast power, that the Pope is able to, so many Catholic countries will give him the power, basically. Well, want to see how all this fits together for 2023, really. We said that the signs of 2015 were an 8-year warning, and because the events have to allow a 7-year ending, after the sabbatical of 2015, we have 6 years, and then the sabbatical of 2022, the sabbatical is 2022, when I believe we will see another huge event, even worse than what we're seeing now. This is because, going back from Roe v. Wade, every 7 years has had a significant sign of end times. Roe v. Wade being Israel was liberated from Egypt on a jubilee type of event, and Egypt was punished because they threw the babies in the river and they enslaved Israel. Roe v. Wade was like throwing the babies in the river, and from that, a 50-year interval from 1973 comes to 2023. It's the 8-year warning that we've talked about from what happened in 2015 as well. So multiple ways of arriving at 2023. Jubilee event from the Roe v. Wade. Every year, every 7 years has had a major sign. I just might enumerate those. 7 years from 1973 is 1980, and there was a dark day when Mount St. Helens erupted and winds carried the ash over 3 northwestern states. And a significant sign of end times, because Amos says the sun will be darkened and moon turned to blood and so on. And some of that is linked in Scripture to modern events as we see them. 7 years later was the Persian Gulf crisis, when we nearly got into war, but it's an omen of end times when we will get into war with Persia or Iran. The Pope in that same year landed in Miami, went around our country, just like the Roman army went around Jerusalem before its destruction. Again, an omen of end times. An earthquake in Whittier, California, populated area, and we will see an earthquake, I believe, in the Day of the Lord end time in 2023. Huge earthquake that initiates it. Isaiah 2:12 is the first mention of Day of the Lord. I believe that a rule of first use finds that where something is first found, God often gives a little more detail or context, and it says in verse 21 that he will shake terribly the earth. That fits also with what we were talking about before the break, when we were talking about a ram and a goat for the end time. We showed the picture here of Daniel 8, 17, the vision at the time of the end, and specifically, Zechariah 14 says that nations will be gathered against Jerusalem to battle. Houses rifled, women ravished, half the city goes into captivity, and then the Lord fights against them. Well, I believe he'll use the ram and goat to fight, but also, here are the Muslims in Jerusalem, God's city. He calls it his country, really, my holy city. And the Muslims are there with a dome on the rock which has an inscription, Allah has no son. And all of a sudden, the earthquake that it says in Joel 3:16, the Lord will roar from Jerusalem, the heavens and earth will shake. I believe that will be the earthquake that initiates end times. The whole world will know judgment is coming. This is an end time period. They will wonder and be afraid. In Amos 3:7, God won't do anything without revealing it through his servants. And the next verse says, the lion has roared, who will not fear? Well, this is the Lion of Judah. And everybody at that roar will fear. Okay, fear God. That's the message. Don't fear man and what man can do to you, but fear what God can do. And it will be a signal. Somehow, God is picking just one single act that he will do that will split things in different directions. Right now, there are people in Israel who have Jews. They're there for free land. They have no interest in their spiritual heritage. There's gay parades in Tel Aviv, and Orthodox Jews that hate Christians would spit on the name of Christ. Bad situation. And I believe that what's coming with the Muslims will get them out of there, okay, because they don't belong there. We think, and by the way, they aren't reading the Bible according to what they should understand in their Torah, because Torah says that in Leviticus 26 chapter, verses 18, 21, 24, and 28, if you walk contrary to me, I'll punish you 7 times over. That's what God said. And in Ezekiel 4, verses 5 and 6, we get the time period. Ezekiel was asked to lie on his side 390 days, each day for a year that Israel was in apostasy. They were in apostasy for 390 years. And if you do the math, punishing them 7 times over, 7 times 390 is 2,730. That's the longest time prophecy in the Bible that has been fulfilled to this point. And my point is that the Jews were not to go to Israel and when the UN gave them the land. It wasn't the UN's land to give. It's God's land. And he's going to take it back. And all that they think was a great victory militarily so that the Jews got possession of Israel, the devil can give victory too. And they are there in bondage, I think, because they were not free to return from when Sennacherib came to Israel and took them captive. God said he would punish them 7 times over, and it began in 722 BC. Subtract 722 from 2730, the math is easy. It's 2008, but oops, no year 0, so it's 2009. And in 2009, they should have been free to return to Israel, except that the Pope shows up in May to Jerusalem, which is the sign to flee. So they weren't free to return even then, if you're going to listen to Yeshua and the abomination that makes desolate and so on. The wrong system was there. So God was trying to spare people who will listen to his son, I believe. And it's not about converting the Jews in the time of tribulation or what. They're going to get chased out. But I believe God is going to put 2 sticks together in the end time. We'll talk about this later, really, but in Ezekiel 37th chapter, after a great shaking, which I believe is the earthquake in verse 7, Ezekiel 37, verse 7, 2 sticks come together and make one kingdom. And the 2 sticks represent the 10 tribes of Israel, which went into apostasy, with the 2 tribes of Judah. Judah, I think, represents Jews who keep the Sabbath and so on in Jerusalem, truer sense. The 10 tribes represent Israel, Christians who have a false center of worship in Dan, and today we have a false center of worship with Sunday. Okay, but when we make the covenant and get back to God, we have to be united, and Jews who accept Messiah and Christians who accept Torah will be fully compatible in a kingdom in Ezekiel 37. So that's how we're getting there, and we're headed that way, but the timing is helpful to understand. We've been looking at how every 7 years big events happen for end time foreshadowing. And so if going from 1987, when the Pope landed in Miami, went around our country, Persian Gulf crisis, earthquake in Whittier, California, stock market crash 500 points. All of those are signs of end times when the economy is going to be blown. And add 7 years to that, it's 1994, Rwanda. 1 million Protestant Tutsis were slaughtered by their Catholic neighbors when the Pope told the UN to just stand down, let the local government handle it. Well, the UN had enough forces to easily stop it, but they didn't. They just listened to the Pope and let the Catholic government handle it. And the Pope later said, sorry, well, my foot. I don't think so. I think he is the beast system that is also why Pope Francis said the Bible's a dangerous book. It unmasks their masquerade. His title, Lord God the Pope, is as phony as a $3 bill. And so I just say we're living in a time when he's going to get defrocked and his kingdom is going to be ended. But we're in process getting there. Before it happens, he's going to get power for 3.5 years, according to Revelation 13:5. Power was given to him to continue 42 months. Well, long story short, we're looking at different things from counting every 7 years from Roe v. Wade, and we've come to Rwanda, add another 7, and it's 2001. World Trade Center, huge sign of end times. Add 7 more, 2008, and I saw the new moon in the sky when Congress voted $760 billion in bailout, and the stock market crashed 10 days during the Feast of Trumpets for 10 days. In Tishri, the 7th month Jewish, they were to blow the trumpet on the new moon for 10 days till the Day of Atonement. And we had an atonement, or should have, with the economy. If they had not bailed out the banksters, it would have worked better. Okay, but all those timings and God's feast days of Leviticus 23 are significant for end times, and we need to understand them better so we can be ready at those times. And we'll get to that. All right, and then we already covered in the first half of this hour the 7 events, when then signs of sun darkened, moon turned to blood, the Iran nuclear treaties, the abomination standing where ought not, and so on for 2015. And they point, that's the 6th, 7th from 1973, Roe v. Wade. The 7th one will be 2022. And since everything has been bad, I believe next year is going to be bad. Okay, and to me, it's not rocket science to think that what they think is solved with a shot is not solved at all, and is big trouble because of what it may do to the immune system, basically. And I don't want to lose this channel for saying too much here. Hope you can follow it from week to week, but God bless you. Stay with us. I just think we are on the cusp of huge events and maybe millions dying, okay, because they trusted science instead of the Bible. I could tell you, I'll just make a quick review really. If you use the concordance online and use the word physicians with an S, every reference to physicians is negative. Joseph asked the physicians to embalm his father when he died. Well, that suggests that so many people are dying for the physicians that they also do the embalming, okay? And it links in Job 13, verse 4, lying with physicians. They're miserable liars, okay? Job was talking to his friend who thought they were worthless. And again in Christ, Yeshua's time, he said the woman with an issue of blood spent all her money on physicians and was no better. And Daniel, Daniel had to opt out of the government health plan in first chapter. He didn't want the king's meat, the king's wine, and so on. We got to do that too. And so, bottom line is that also I forgot to mention NIH and Pool of Bethesda. But Pool of Bethesda was mythology that they could people would be healed if they were the first one into the pool after an angel troubled the water. Well, nobody saw the angel. It was just a myth. But Christ healed a man who was been there miserably for 30 some years. And but Bethesda, Maryland is where NIH, home of NIH, where our tax dollars are pooled and where we expect to get cured. Well, not really. That's a myth. It's what we put into our mouth or into our system that makes body chemistry, not some chemical from some pharmaceutical agency. God showed what was to be consumed. In Genesis 1, every tree bearing seed or every herb bearing seed is for food. And if it grows out of the ground, as one cardiologist said, it's safe. But otherwise, might be cholesterol and other problems. So, and China study also supports that. Well, we're coming down to the end where I think need to see how all this fits together. And the 50th year, after 7 sevens, ending in 2022, the 50th is 2023. God liberated Israelites from Egypt as a jubilee event, and He's going to liberate us, I believe, with an event like sudden destruction in Egypt. When Paul said sudden destruction in the day of the Lord, night of the Lord was sudden destruction with the Egyptians when death fell, and at midnight a cry went up. Well, the wedding parable in Matthew 25, verse 6, at midnight there was a cry made. The bridegroom comes. Well, when we see the calamity on America and the world like it is in Egypt, I think we can understand the bridegroom is coming, but he took them to Sinai for a covenant and later said, I'm married. He regarded the covenant as a marriage relationship, and that's how we're going to have to do it too. Make a covenant. Favorite author defined the end time church as a covenant keeping people, and it's not just about a quick snatch to heaven. So that's a broad view. I'd like to encourage some of you to visit Amazon, type in my name, Richard Ruhling, spelled with an H, Ruhling, and you can get a book from Lockdown to Knockdown, The Fall of America. And even if you don't buy the book, if you go to Amazon, there's it says look inside, and you click that look inside, and you can click the right arrow. You have to wait for a minute for it to the platform to change, but you can get to the introduction and read the introduction and click on the links. And I guarantee you some interesting information on health that you don't find online today, or news media, which are sweeping information under the rug and not true. There's a deception. These are, as Alex Jones says, info wars. There's information wars, and we got to stand up for the truth. Christ, Yeshua, is the truth, he said. So if we stand for truth, we get it right, and if we aren't careful, we're in trouble, I think. So running out of time now, trying to see, I think that it's an understanding of timing. Well, let me give you this. In Joel, first chapter, the day of the Lord comes in the context of 4 generations in verses 3 and 4. You tell your children, let them tell their children, and then another generation is 4. And cankerworm, palmerworm, locust, and caterpillar. What the locust leaves, the caterpillar eats, nothing left. I think that is true of 2 things. Going back 4 generations, a Bible generation is 40 years. In Hebrews 3, 9, and 10, God bore the rebellious generation 40 years. So from President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of freedom, 4 generations, 160 years, comes to 2023 from 1863. It's also 4 generations for the Seventh-day Adventist Church that founded in 1863. 4 generations I think their general conference is over. Will be in debt. The earthquake that's coming is going to ruin their city, and it gets burned up, as we see in Matthew 22, verses 6 and 7. The remnant have their city burned. I think that's Adventists, and they are the Laodicean church, lukewarm. All Western Christianity really is the Laodicean church if we're content with materialism. Got to go now, over time, but thanks. God bless you. We'll see you again soon, next week. Bring your friends.